So before we begin, is it weird to be called your entire name every time you do one of these?
No, it's not. I mean, I'm actually used to it. Although, I've never gone by my whole name, but people say it. It's the one my mom and dad gave me, so I respond to it.
Gotcha. I'm gonna call you Sean just for future warning.
You can call me Hey You, Yo, whatever.
Gotcha. All right, before we dive into Frank and Penelope, I have to mention your appearance on The Boys. Obviously, in The Boys, you play Gunpowder, fantastic character. Firstly, how did you get involved with the project, and was having a background in stunt coordinating, did that assist in kind of securing the role for you?
I don't think so. Eric Kripke, the creator, dude's a TV genius, and he wanted me to do it, and I've made a career out of doing stuff that nobody sees. So when you get an opportunity to do something like that, you just, you Tourette out. Yes. So it was a no-brainer,
Were you familiar with the show or the comic prior to that, or was that part of the prep for the role?
Say it one more time.
Were you familiar with the comic book and or the show, and was that like prep, to getting into the character?
Man, I hadn't read the comic book. I didn't even see the show. I mean, not until I went to Toronto and was being sequestered for COVID. I did go in hiding for 2 weeks. That's when I watched the show. And I mean, I told my kids that, I was going to do a superhero show. So whenever we first found it out, we all got in bed one night and we turned on The Boys. And then episode 1, I was like, pause, whoa, I really feel like some Pop-Tarts, don't you? I had no idea. It was only then that I realized, oh shit, this is something different than a Marvel, Spider-Man show or something.
Yeah, oddly enough, today I think is one of the infamous shows. It'll be debuting today. It's the Hero-gasm episode. It kind of starts off with a ton of warnings. Too bad you didn't have that in line, for whenever you were watching it with the family.
Yeah, no shit.
But I want to jump from that to Born a Champion. Speaking of stunt coordinating, I watched the film this morning, and wow, the ending, you're an asshole. That's all I'll say about the ending, because I don't want to spoil it. I recommended it to a ton of friends that are MMA and UFC fans. Outside of this, I do a UFC betting podcast, so it was definitely a love letter. And I guess really, I know you've been doing BJJ for years. I've had a buddy personally that has rolled with you in the past. His name's Sean Key. He used to run a shop out in Conroe called Iron Mantis. And my only real question is because I really want to get to the meat of the new film, is did you always envision Edwin Barboza as the villain?
I did not. I've always thought that he had nice Khabib shirt, by the way. I've always thought that Edson has a very menacing look that is so counter to his personality. I mean, that guy is one of the nicest, sweetest, docile personalities that you'll ever come across. And he is a violent headhunting killer. So I thought he had a great look, but I wrote it in 2007. I wrote it alone in my bed one night in 2007. And he wasn't even really profoundly on the scene at that point yet. But he was certainly, whenever when the film came to fruition and it was time he was high on my list. I couldn't get a hold of him. I didn't know anybody that knew him, which is crazy. Being in the jiu-jitsu world, it seems like, I would know somebody that could get in touch with him. So I sent him, I went to his Instagram and I sent him an Instagram message saying, hey, I wrote this script. I have no idea if you have any interest, but I'd love for you to take a look at it. Didn't respond. Sent him another one. Didn't respond. So I looked at his photos, picture of he and his wife, and I saw his wife's Instagram. And I sent his wife an Instagram and said, pardon for me, I'm jumping into your DMs, but it'd be wonderful if, and she responded right away. She goes, well, here, send the script over. And next thing you know, Edson was on the set. And he was a pleasure to work with. And I thought he killed that role.
Yeah, I agree. Both, I noticed Mickey Gall in there as well. You know, he obviously he kind of plays the villain in the Octagon as well. So that was kind of a very typical character for him to play. But I thought he did really well, you know, in that role too. But yeah, ultimately, it's like you said, the perfect love letter. Especially, I grew up watching these tapes, you know, renting them from Blockbuster, you know, catching them on TV when I can. You know, it was. It was really fun, man. And you know, I look forward to more of these things coming from you. I thought it was fantastic.
And I honestly, I appreciate that, man, because that's a huge chunk of my soul's in that movie, man. And I hope it gets discovered. I hope people, especially the MMA community, finds it, man. So I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, I mentioned, I think I looked earlier, it's on Hulu. So hopefully that'll help bring an audience to it. You know, sadly, a lot of these movies and shows don't really get noticed until they're on, you know, some sort of streaming service. But yeah, this is definitely one that I would kind of hold high. You know, it's like Bloodsport, but for MMA. Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
I
Um,
appreciate.
Another thing I wanted to mention, you know, I'm actually calling you from Montgomery, Texas, one of the filming locations for Powder.
Yes.
And while I would love to talk about Powder, or you know, any of these infamous films you've been a part of, I really want to jump into another film that has Texas roots, which is Frank and Penelope. Not only was this filmed in Texas, you know, I believe, or in Austin, you know, I saw a special thanks to Smithville. What is it about Smithville? You know, it's kind of became a hot spot for Hollywood. What is it about, you know, Smithville that kind of, you know, pulled you in?
You know, we shot parts of it in Austin. You know, Smithville. We shot the vast majority of it in Terlingua.
Yeah,
And really, I don't have an allegiance to any rock formation or pile of dirt. I have an allegiance to cultures and mindsets and people and a type of people that live anywhere. And so that's really, it's more important to me than, you know, any seascape or mountain range. And, you know, the places that we shot, you know, they have a fairly pungent signature onto their own that's irreplaceable. And Terlingua is no different. I mean, it's like Marfa, Texas. It's
yeah.
this odd little art community out at the tip of Texas in the sweltering, unforgiving heat, and it's a barren wasteland. And you can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I was actually in that area. Where was I was in Bastrop. I was kind of driving around, and obviously, you know, that's a small town in itself. And we ended up in Smithville, and you know, we didn't even know it was like the Hope Floats area until we were actually there. Beautiful place. Obviously, Texas is kind of ideal for these types of films. But my question is was Texas the choice because of like COVID restrictions, or was it they're a little bit more lax here?
Yeah, but it was a purely artistic choice.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, you know, it was predominantly exterior, which made for easier shooting around COVID. But you know, I wrote this with a very specific look in mind, and certainly we could have gone into parts of New Mexico, parts of Arizona, maybe Nevada, but where we ended up, it's hard to replicate that look and feel. So we stuck with the GST, great state of Texas.
I like it. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've seen even interior shots of bars in like Huntsville, and it's like that's not what Huntsville looks like. So
Yes.
it was really cool to see like that kind of world take shape, because this was kind of a bit whimsical and like a bit dreamlike. And I think that that has to do with the writing. And you and John Thaddeus kind of shaved or shared the writing credits for this one. I was curious about that process. How did you guys work together? And, you know, ultimately, how did we get what we saw?
Thaddeus is a great dude. He's an incredibly talented dude, and it was a pleasure to work with him. You know, it's when when you see kind of eye to eye, it's a very unlabored process, and I look forward to seeing, you know, the next handful of things that Thaddeus does, because he's a genius, and collaborating him it was a pleasure. It wasn't filled with effort at all.
Yeah, speaking of that, are you guys, in the process of maybe sitting down and writing a sequel to this, or do you have any thoughts on that?
That's really a product of how well it's received.
Yeah.
And in this burgeoning new age of cinema, where theaters are sort of releasing Top Guns and DC films and mega things. It's interesting. The theaters are being kept afloat. Even the 24 plex, they're being kept afloat by one film. It's whether it's Top Gun or it's the Jurassic Park or now Elvis. It's a weird time, and people aren't really yet fully familiar with streaming, but they are when it goes to like a Netflix or something like that. So it's an interesting time. Discoverability is an issue. If people know about it, they'll certainly go and give things a try. But it's going to be a product of if people watch it, if people enjoy it. The same as any film. You don't just go and make 5 parts of a film if nobody sees the first one. So it's but I hope it gets found. I hope this film gets found.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because of obviously the ending, but then I just thought that there was maybe so much more you guys maybe had in mind. The world is very interesting, and even if we don't follow, the leads, we could build on another group of people living within this world. Kind of touching on that, I've seen comparisons to True Romance, obviously Thelma and Louise, which you guys, make a little note of in the film. Texas Chainsaw, The Hills Have Eyes. Was this a conscious decision to kind of nod to these films, or, and then ultimately, what do you guys think about the comparisons?
Well, I'll be 100% honest with you. I've never seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've never seen The Hills Have Eyes. I referenced Thelma and Louise because my main character, having seen that film, implores him to do something in his own life. And I'll leave it at that. But outside of that, I don't think it has any parallels to Thelma and Louise outside of an old car and a blacktop. But those are all flattering. They're all great films unto their own. So I'm not trying to distance myself from them. I'm just saying that it wasn't intentional. If there is anything close to it, The Hills Have Eyes, it's has nothing to do with my intention, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I 100% saw True Romance. Love that film. Yeah. So if somebody wants to cast it even in that shadow, I'll gladly take that. I love that film.
Texas boy not seeing Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Travesty. Next time I'm at a con that you're there, I'm going to bring it to you.
All right, brother.
And let's see. Also, I love the cast. It's an eclectic group of actors, people we know so many different things from. And it was kind of interesting to kind of see them kind of fall into their roles, because there was moments where, you weren't really sure where the story was going to go. And I think that that's ultimately what kept me interested, was the cast, how they interpreted the script, and also the music. But ultimately, I guess my question is, how close were you involved in the casting process?
Oh, I hands-on. I mean, that's casting is a huge part of directing. I mean, if you do it wrong, your workload multiplies by a factor of 50. If you do it right, your workload almost goes away. So, specifically to you, our casting director, I thought she did an amazing job. Long monologues about what I thought for each and every character. And she came at me with a name that I'd never heard of. And that takes a lot for a casting director. Casting directors are usually, their merit is usually directly proportional to the name value that they bring. So somebody that said, I think this is exactly what you want, but they don't have a following, you're not even going to recognize this name. That's a confident casting director. And she was 100% right. I wanted a sort of a delicate Audrey Hepburn with a violent sexuality of a Marilyn Monroe in my Penelope. And she came up with Kaylee Cowan, knocked it out of the park. I mean, the minute I saw her audition, I called people, I said, in my opinion, we could stop looking right now. And we were looking at names. And it didn't take much argument. Everybody else saw it and they said, You're exactly right. And then she came up with Billy Budenich, who I wanted a sort of a cerebral quality of a Montgomery Clift, but the sort of whimsical, emotional signature of a James Dean. And she brings me Billy. And I saw that audition. I thought, these two perfectly exemplify this sort of dated feel that I want for this film. And the EPs, Alan Gilmer, Scott Dolezal, they agreed. I mean, it wasn't an argument or anything, which is very rare, you know, to have two unknowns lead your film. So it was, I think they have long storied careers in front of them, both of them.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely felt the kind of old Hollywood vibe that you were going for. I really respect that, because ultimately they pushed that envelope to the extent. And like I said earlier, I didn't really know where, you know, each scene was going. And with them in those roles, it kind of made it a little bit more interesting, because had it been someone that I recognized, you know, I knew these guys from kind of off kilter things, but you know, it had it been someone like a Natalie Portman or, you know, John Hamm or something, it would have kind of taken me out of the film a bit. And so I applaud you for taking the chance, because it made it that much more intriguing for me as a viewer. That, for what it's worth.
I
The
appreciate it.
the one thing I did want to ask, you know, and I kind of touched on it earlier, was the music. Obviously, there's a lot of recognizable songs. You know, there's a few covers, you know, kind of scattered throughout. And I'm curious as to if that was a choice as far as budget. Did that kind of help with the budget, as far as like pulling a cover from Cat Power, you know, pulling another cover of a song we all know, but it's sang by someone else, you know, that we might not know?
You know, it's the way I write, which kind of flies in the face of every writing tutorial, but it's the only way I know how to do it. I write to music. I mean, some of the most profound philosophy I find in music, more so than even philosophy. And I knew I wanted them to meet inside this club. And so I knew that his first visual, I think men are very visually driven creatures, women are emotional driven creatures. I wanted his visual to be something. So her original dance, and I've been addicted to music since I was a child. The first present I ever asked for by name was the '68 comeback special by Elvis. So the second thing was Abbey Road. So I'm a huge audiophile. So I went and I thought, you know, what I want her to dance to is I want her to dance to Valerie June's rendition of Cosmic Dancer. For example, on the wall, the lyric, "What's it like to be a loon? I liken it to a balloon." I even wrote that on the outside wall in the opening when he's being led into, not only is he being led in by the sonic nature of music, but he's being led by these intriguing lyrics. And not to expound and make it sound more than it is, but that's my process. And so I went to the producers and I said, is it possible that we can pre-allocate some funds for a soundtrack? Because by the time I finished the script and I wrote, you know, the first half of it on our location scout, I had assigned a certain sonic signature to almost every scene. And so I had some that I really wanted to keep. And we adjusted the budget that made allowance for that. Now that's reverse engineering. Normally you shoot the film and then you see if you can raise extra money for sound, or, you know, I wanted to make sure that we had these musical moments to parallel the musical, the emotional texture of the writing. And to me, I think that's crucial. You know, there's plenty of people that would argue to the contrary, but for me, I felt pretty strongly about it, and they were wide open. You know, we had to make some budgetary adjustments in shooting it to allocate for that, but they were wide open to it, and I'm incredibly grateful.
Excellent. Yeah, one of my favorite scenes obviously is the one right outside of the bar, and like the set dressing, like kind of like you were mentioning with the balloon and the title of the film. I thought that was next level stuff. So the fact that you were involved with that as well, it really kind of showcases how much, you know, these films mean to you, which is really cool from someone that obviously just sat through the film.
Appreciate it.
In closing, you know, like obviously we're kind of still looking for an audience as far as this film goes. I think that it has a lot of potential. Is there anything that you want to mention, to people that may be seeing this, in theaters soon, or might be seeing this on a streaming surface, in preparation for their viewing?
If you've grown up in a world where none of the vehicles will break the back end loose and slide side to side and give your innards a tickle, this one's for you. There's a pedal that will set your soul on fire. It'll leave 2 track marks on the blacktop and all across your soul. I hope you give it a check out. It would mean the world to me, and I hope you dig it.
Excellent. Well, here at CineDump, we let the doers know how they're doing. And Sean, you're doing just fine. Thank you for your time. Everyone go check out Frank and Penelope. I'll post links below. And yeah, thanks again, man. I really appreciate this. Long time coming. And peace out, buddy.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.